Convene our committee of the whole meeting for March 13th, 2019. Approval of the agenda. Moved and second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I turn it over to staff, please, to start a review of our 2019 financial plan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. The first workshop scheduled for this year's financial plan or budget and the next 5-year financial plan. I'd like to mention a few points before I hand over to my colleague Dale Cordes, the Director of Finance, to go over this draft. First, staff have worked hard and diligently at coming up with what we think is a reasonable draft moving forward, considering the Economic Development Plan, the OCP, and priorities Council has already mentioned. You're going to notice this plan is informed positively by increased revenue through growth. And this is predicted to continue for the next year or two through what you're seeing around town. That's a good thing. You're going to view through this budget as well a continued sense of cost control that staff is applying to the way it operates to make sure that taxpayers get value for money. So we're not out there to waste money per se. You're also going to notice that the theme of asset management continues to develop in how we approach capital project and operations. So there's a logic and an intellectual structure as to why we're doing things in the order that we're doing. And that was directed by previous councils, and certainly this one reinforces that intellectual rigor as we move forward. And Mr. Cordes is also going to give examples, positive examples, that despite any increase we propose, which is reasonable, of course, as usual, but most residential taxpayers are actually going to experience a decrease in tax. So overall, an effective and can be viewed as a good news proposed draft budget. So I'd like to pass it on to Dale to move forward and go through it with you. And obviously, should you have questions at any time, please pose them while they're hot in your mind.
Yes, please do. Thank you. Just to start off, John touched on the proposed just to summarize where we are with the municipal taxation aspect. Overall, from 2019 over 2018, we've increased tax revenue $264,000 in the budget. This represents about a 3.4% overall revenue increase, not to be confused with the tax rate increase. They're two different animals. And composed of that is we've upped our contribution to the municipal infrastructure levy by about $90,000 over last year, out of that 264. General municipal revenue has gone up 132,000, or about 2.4%, and then the police portion has gone up 42,000, which is about a 2.1% increase. So all those combined gives us about 3.4% increase over last year, which, as I mentioned, is 264,000. And so just to carry on with the taxation side of it, included in your package, you have a few pages there of some scenarios that we'll put up on the screen. And so as you can see, in the samples that we took from the assessment roll, some residential properties, you can see in the red that their assessment's actually going up, but the total amount of their taxes is going down. And this is basically, in most of the scenarios, you see a 12.27 increase, they're still paying less. 10.8, they're still paying less. 9, they're paying less. You see 14.8, they're paying margin, almost the same, but just a little bit less. And then when we get up to about 16%, that's where, if their assessment's gone up more than about 16%, then they're going to see an increase in their taxes. should also mention, going back to that 264,000 extra revenue that we're generating, about 170,000 of that's due to new construction. So it's assessments that weren't on the roll last year from either absolutely new buildings or improvements. But it's, in BC Assessments terminology, it's new construction, so it's improvements that weren't there last year. So out of that 264, we're really only increasing the local existing taxation by about 90,000. So that's why you'll see a lot of properties paying less tax, but as a group, there's going to be a few obviously that will pay a bit more, but it's not going to be a huge number. Because the tax rates that you see there are all generated through our spreadsheet that we have through GFOA that we I've got through some seminars, and it's a wonderful spreadsheet that generates the tax rate. I don't just pull it out of a hat. It's all based with assessments and formulas. So anytime the assessments, and again, this is based on the what they call a completed roll, or in other terms, it's the preliminary tax roll. On April 1st, we'll get the revised roll or the final roll. So those rates are going to change slightly, assuming that we don't change the 264 amount of revenue that we want to generate. So that'll come out of our discussions. But that's our starting point for what I put in the draft. So, and then a couple business properties, they'll see a bit more savings. 4.5%, they're going to pay that much less. This particular property's only gone up 1.78% from last year's assessment, so they're saving about 7,000 over last year. And then there's one there with 13%, and their savings are about 450. So that's kind of a trend that you'll see throughout. If you were to go pick a property and see what their assessment increase was over last year, as a general rule, if the assessment didn't increase more than about 16%, they're going to see savings. Also, just for your information, it's not to do with taxation, but in your package, there's a spreadsheet that I put together for council's benefit for seeing where our status of the reserves are at the end of December of last year. And then a summary of the comparison of the assessments from last year's revised roll to 2019's completed roll, just to see the percentage increases there. So, in going through the financial plan, and again, also in your package, you saw my legend with colors there. I like to, I think it helps council see what line items that we can't really play with. I've color-coded them to various categories, whether it be wages, which are basically by contract. Insurance premiums are set unless we stop insuring our assets. That's pretty much a given. We have some contractual obligations. Some of the amounts here are set by other agencies. For example, the library board. We've got some that are by district policy, which is grants and aids comes to mind as an example. Utilities and communications are pretty much based on prior year's numbers, so we can't really play with those too much unless we start cutting back on the power consumption by turning things off. So there's also some numbers in here that you shouldn't be concerned with because they have no bottom or impact on the bottom line, and that's the amortization. It's a non-cash, it's an accounting entry. It's offset by a transfer, so those numbers are yet to be determined as I get finals from last year, which I don't have yet. Some of the numbers in here you'll see that, and it basically relates to the utility funds. the revenue is pretty much determined in some of the accounts because we've already set the bills out. For example, we set out the residential utilities in January, so we kind of know what we're expecting. And for a general rule of thumb, the way I like to put a budget together is unless I know the amount, I tend to go on the side of conservative numbers. Because by inflating them, and you know you're not going to get them, it's not helping your realistic financial plan. So some of the numbers are conservative. They might be low, but I don't have a crystal ball either. So I'm not going to go through this line by line. I'll get Linda to sort of just page down as I go through here. And I'll touch on some of the items as we go through the, more of the significant numbers, not the lower numbers that don't have a big impact on the budget. So on the revenue side, I've talked about the taxation with the increase there. No real changes in amounts there on the north part of page 1 in your binder. Most of page 2 are numbers that are set by other agencies. So, for example, school tax and all the MFA tax, the BC assessment, the regional district, they're all amounts that we are told this is what we got to collect for them, so we offset it with what we pay them. So they're basically a wipeout, except for one small adjustment is that we do get a Fraser Health grant towards the transit. And what we do is if, for example, just on an easier example, if the regional district asked us to go out and collect $100,000 for them, I would only tax the tax payers $75,000 as a total because we got the $25,000 reduction in the grant. So that's why you see the net out there not at zero. All the utility taxes from the utility companies, they're all amounts that they give us based on their Pittsburgh charter that they're required to pay municipalities 1% of their revenues that they earned in the prior year. So we get letters in the fall, and that's what those numbers are. So they're pretty much bang on. Page 3. Only one highlight on that page really is, and I just put them at zero under the fire protection agreements. One of the First Nations did not renew, so we have a bit less revenue on both the operations and capital side.
Who chose not to have coverage?
Show him.
Thank you.
Page 4. Page 4, there's no real changes from prior years. We had a really good year last year on the planning and building side of things. We dropped them a little bit from last year, just because last year is quite a very good year, I guess is the way to put it. Yep. So I don't want to be too presumptuous and think that it's going to happen back to back. So if it does, great.
Does some of that money have to go back, or is this just the permits and not the deposits?
Not deposits.
Just permits?
Yeah, it's all actual revenue. The permits stay on the balance sheet. For the security deposits or permits. The one item I don't like really budgeting for is for cemetery. So those are fairly conservative numbers from prior year. Moving on to page 5. The biggest item on there is, well, I'll go through a couple of them there. The small community protection grant is just based on last year, so it's probably in the ballpark. It may vary slightly. gas tax. And in there as well, we have the Richmond Hill Pathway Grant. And that's gonna change, because when I put this together, I thought it was a 50-50 grant, but it's actually, we're only paying, I believe, Kevin, 27%. So that'll get adjusted. It's to our favor. It means we have to use less reserves, because the 420 grant portion is gonna go up higher.
Can I ask you a question? On the very, where it says rental income, Fraser Health, for the health unit, $400 a month. Can we not change that, increase that, or is that?
Well, it's under contract right now.
It is under contract?
Yeah. Well, there's a lease agreement.
That's right, that lease agreement is being renegotiated, I've got agreement in principle at a new higher amount, I don't wanna talk about it, because it's not finalized. But I mentioned this before to previous council, and perhaps to you, that as part of asset management, what we intend to do with all our properties that are used by other agencies or individuals is to at least cost capture to maintain that property moving
Yes.
forward. When I first got here, these properties were paying $0 or $1. So the trend is, even if you look at the Arts Council and the art gallery stuff with the new building, we negotiated a sizable increase that won't necessarily cover it all, but will cover a significant portion compared to what was not being covered before.
Well, because, I was just thinking, like, last year we put a new roof on, and I think we put siding on. And
New
that's a
roof
lot,
siding work,
that's a lot of cost, and then we only get $4,800. Plus, we have to pay, I think there's insurance we have to pay on that building, it's probably $1,100, $1,200. So we come up with basically,
so I will report out when I ink the deal, but it will be a sizable increase from a percentage perspective. And it'll continue to trend upward. Also bear in mind, Fraser Health has invested significant amount in the building too, so we're in a good position for negotiating. They're not gonna abandon the building.
maybe we should sell it,
Pardon me?
maybe we should sell it to them, get it off our,
This is an in-camera session, I think, Councilor Anderson, we've had this discussion with staff, or I have, so I think we should leave it alone for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so that's about page 5, page 6. So the 420 Richmond Hill reserve transfer would get adjusted downwards based on when I finalize the numbers with Kevin. And then from the infrastructure reserve, we're using 185 as our 10% for the Othello Road project. And 113,000 is coming out of that reserve that we've already received this year from a developer for the pavement project. So that's reducing our portion. And at this stage, and Kevin can speak to this once we get to it on the capital side, currently we're proposing 287 out of the gas tax reserve, but I won't talk about that any further until later on when we talk about capital on the paving side of things. Moving to the expenditure side, nothing glaring on page 7. Again, this is where you start seeing some of the color codes.
Just tell me what page end up.
Page 7.
7, okay.
So we're on page 8.
That's 5, 6, 7.
There you go.
Okay.
Page 8, there you go.
Okay, so nothing really on page 8 out of the norm.
Memorized a good portion of it.
I guess the one item on page 9 that we still have some work to do in this building regarding the washrooms from the roof leaks, I guess, and some frontal work. So that's in there for 2019. Another item on page 9 that's to be finalized is the HR contract, and that's for OH&S safety contract work. Two things on this amount, or this line item. One is it's gonna get moved to our safety area, so it'll come out of HR. And secondly, when you see the draft, the next draft, we might have a different number there. But we're still talking about how it's gonna work out, whether,
So if I can, Dale, I'll just take a minute. So you'll recall last year's the budget, we are moving our health and safety program forward, both because it's mandated by WorkSafe BC and good management practice. So we've established a lot of we had the big study about the consultant, so we kind of know where we have to go now. So we're looking at potentially establishing a half-time position in concert with, for example, Kent, potentially. Or if that won't work out, we'll look at trying to get someone on half-time or contract for half-time. So we know what we have to do, now we have to get the horsepower to do it, to finalize and move the program forward, continue forward. So that's why it may change where it goes as to what options we can truly pursue when I finalize discussions with Kent. And then we'll get you that information. That number should not change ideally too much upwards. Because again, when we as a staff talked about the options and then we communicated with Kent an idea, they seemed on board as far as, well, we both have this need, so let's see if we can do this. We'll share it out.
page 10. Nothing really stands out for anything significantly different from last year. Page 11. Same thing, is very consistent with the prior years. Page 12 got a lot of color on it, so there's not much really change on that page. Page 13. Again, not a lot change from prior years. Page 14. Going to the fire department. There's some building RM that needs to be done. And some training opportunities for the firefighters. Page 15 and portion of 16 is just the vehicle expenses there. Consistent with prior years. And balance of page 16 is the vehicles. And then we get into bylaw. Nothing significant from prior years. Page 17. 17, I don't see anything that stands out that's different from prior years.
Dale, I'd like to speak to the public works and minimum wages.
Oh, certainly.
So, I'm proposing a new position with operations. It would be a certified engineering technologist. Now, this position would be basically to assist myself with moving forward with asset management. I'm finding right now that I'm unable to keep up with particularly field work associated with it. And so I'm talking about like condition assessments, some surveying potentially if this person is capable. And so what I envision is something similar to what other communities have. This person would coordinate and inspect municipal capital projects and development activities. Now, in relation to development activities, this position would be mutually beneficial to operations as well as planning and development. So I went through the list of developments that I've been involved with since I started, so over the past 3 years, and you know, at any given time, there's between 20 and 30 active developments in different stages. And so how I'm involved in that is drawings come to me, and I have to review them, or I send them off to our consulting engineer. Questions go back and forth. You know, field inspections need to be done of certain infrastructure that we're gonna assume. And I feel that I'm not able to actually keep up with the demand. It's to the point where things are getting missed on drawings or actually out in the field because I haven't got enough time to properly evaluate and ensure that the infrastructure that we're taking on is let's just say the best infrastructure that we should be assuming. So we had 2 retirements at the end of 2017. 2 senior people that worked in operations, and those positions were not backfilled. So essentially, with the addition of this position, we wouldn't actually be growing our staff over and above what we had in 2017. I think, there's a lot of times where, developers perhaps get a little frustrated with us because we're having to wait too long for drawing reviews and for us to get back to them. And, I counted up, for example, a 10-lot subdivision on Cowboy Lake Road. I counted up the number of emails just as a measure of how much time I put into that. And we're talking about, over 100 emails just for me on that particular project. We multiply that by about a dozen that we have ongoing at any one time, and it's a lot of work. So I feel that this is a strategic position that'll help us move forward with our asset management plan and ensure that anything that we do moving forward as far as infrastructure renewal and or the receipt of new infrastructure based on development, that will be done well and we'll be able to cross our T's and dot our I's.
And if I could add, Kevin, it probably should save us, so I can't put a number on it, but there should be some savings with dealing with our contract engineer.
Potentially, yes. We've set it up now that we're recovering the cost of our contract engineer when it comes to development. Because realistically, taxpayers shouldn't be paying for the cost of reviewing developers' drawings, et cetera. So there's maybe some potential savings there. It's more so, it's expensive to rely on a contract engineer at, over $100 an hour to do simple field inspections and things of that nature, and even inspections when we have paving projects on the go. If I've got a qualified person out there that can inspect, I don't need to bring an inspector down from True Consulting to do that work. So there will be some savings there in that regard, but it's more so just ensuring that, asset management is a huge piece of the puzzle here. We have a massive infrastructure deficit. If we're going to move forward sustainably and effectively, we need to have the people in place to get us there. And that's why I'm proposing the position.
Councilor Mandel.
Is that proposed new position already included in the
Yeah.
wage?
It's in the 372,000.
Okay. And then you're mentioning that currently there's a cost recovery set up for using True Consulting. Would there still be something like that? Because if you didn't have something like that, then effectively the taxpayers would be paying for reviewing the documents with an in-house person.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Dale, but we could actually cost recover an in-house staff person if they were doing work directly related to development.
I would think so.
As it's in the fees and charges bylaw, as for the
Yeah,
cost of
it has to
development?
be
Yes.
a fee and charges by.
Either directly or indirectly by increasing our fees to cover the cost of that individual.
That's good.
So a portion of that individual's time can be covered off, not all of it, because of course, that person will be spending their time on renewal.
No, understood there. Thank you.
Mr. Dickon, you don't see a need to replace the 2 people that are retired, moved on?
No, we went last year without them, and I feel like we are managing appropriately. We do bring on summer staff, of course, every year to keep up with growing grass, basically, and additional garbage. But I think we need to get I need a technical position in there to assist with. We don't have an engineering department. It's Jazz and myself, and we're. With all the other things that we have on our plates as well, it's difficult to keep up with, and it's such an important piece that I think we're just going backwards if we're not moving forward.
Okay.
With Dale mentioned too, with the planning department obviously means time too. Obviously, some of those costs are you pushing development off to that this person could, like, are you pushing developments off because you're so busy that this person could also assist you to move those forward quicker?
Through your worship, I think ultimately what we've seen is we'll get drawings, preliminary drawings, and be it engineering for utilities or something. And then there will be a bunch of questions that will say, the drawings go to Kevin, Kevin reviews them, Kevin's like, all right, we can tell them this, and then the response is always sent back to them, and then they'll have a follow-up response right away. And so Kevin's got some priority projects. At that point in time, we slowly have to strategically, I don't want to say delay, but sort of put them into a queue, and then it sits there. Sometimes the developer will give me a couple of follow-up calls and say, hey, well, what's happening with this, what's going on with this, and we have to remind them that there's other priorities that the municipality has. But there's always a window of opportunity for that developer to get that development in place, and then also a window of opportunity for the municipality to collect on the taxes on that development. And we don't want to fall in a shortfall situation for both. We want to mutually, grow the municipality.
Yeah, no, answer, thank you.
Councilman,
One more question, not to beat this one to death, but the type of person or the qualifications of the person that would be in this position, is it something that's, they would need a variety of different engineering discipline background, or is it what sort of certification would they? Is there somebody out there that could do everything, because there's a lot of different pieces to engineering, right?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we have a professional engineer in True Consulting. So if ever it comes to, a drawing needs to be stamped or signed off on, we have that ability through our consultant. What we would be looking for is somebody that has is a certified engineering technician or technologist. So they've done a 2-year program at BCIT, for example. So they're not a professional engineer, but they've done 2 years of, let's say, a 4-year program, and they're looking to get out and get some experience. And I'm fairly confident that we would be able to get somebody here. When you set the wage, I think that would be competitive with other areas. I have an example here of Merritt that's looking for the exact same thing that we are, and they're roughly the same size as we are. And it's folks that are looking to move the asset management forward that really need that technical person to do a lot of the legwork. And this person would also be, many of you may know and some of you may not, but we have a GIS program that True Consulting's done up for us. It's got all of our lineal infrastructure basically in GIS. That needs constant update. And as you actually go out and you do condition inspections, you can attach pictures to an asset ID, you can complete notes with information. This is all things that that's just sort of the next piece of the puzzle for us. And when we get to the paving, I'll explain it a bit further, but they are having a hard time having the time to review $1.2 million for the areas to have paved this year. Part of the reason why I want this position. And secondly is, I don't have all the information at my fingertips. So for example, we haven't done the sewer master plan yet. So I don't know, say I want to pave 3rd Avenue, which is on our priority list in our pavement management plan. Well, I have no idea if the sewer at any one point is actually large enough for future growth. So I'm not going to pave that road, and then 2 years later, when the sewer master plan is done, realize that, oh, the pipe's not large enough. We have to rip up the road and put a bigger pipe in. So I need all this information before I can actually, like the pavement's the top layer, right? You want to make sure that everything underneath it is adequate and in good condition before you pave the road. So there's so many pieces to the puzzle that right now I don't have all that information. So I've actually, over the last couple of years, been paving areas where, I know that the infrastructure is young or younger. It hasn't been identified as being a deficit in our asset management plan, and or there is no infrastructure underneath the pavement. So you'll see this year I'm proposing some areas where there is some minimal infrastructure, but I'm also planning with our engineering consultant to work on other areas. So for example, you know, right now I'm planning Robertson Crescent, which is one of our worst roads in town. So the surveying's done, the coring of the road's done. We've got some issues there with not enough hydrants, so I'm building that into the project. So there's so many layers to this that it really takes a lot of time. And I'll get to that further when we get to the budget for paving, but you know, it's not something that you just can go in and say, I want to pave this street, and you rip up the blacktop and put new down. What's the condition of the storm? What's the condition of the sanitary? What's the water system condition? Are the pipes properly sized, like I say, for future growth? Do you need to add CBs? We have a stormwater issue in certain areas. You know, what's the base look like? So we have to sample the base. So there's all sorts of things. So right now, I'm hoping to take 2019 and do some paving, but do planning on other sections, so that we're ready to rock and roll for next year. And I can get into more of that, and I can actually bring more examples of what we're actually doing if council wants to know for the next meeting.
Thank you for your explanation. Any other questions, Mr. Dick, at this time? Councilor Stewart?
No question, just a comment. I'm really happy to see that you're thinking forward this way, and I completely love this idea. I think it's a natural fit for where we're going, and I love it. It's great.
Okay, carrying on. Looking further on 17, and then as we get into pages 18 through
Maybe something past page 17, you got relatively minor, I guess, they're trying to watch the fuel tank moving. We just got new tanks installed there, got some that's still needed, or is that part of a maintenance program that happened every year?
The reason why we had to replace the tanks is we were doing it.
Gotcha.
So,
we go to 113.
yes, later on this year, towards the end of the year, because the tanks are relatively new. It's an annual thing, you get the water out of the fuel, and you polish the contaminants out.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not corroding, it's reducing the potential to corrode the interior of the tank, but you've also got cleaner fuel going into vehicles.
Yeah. So the tanks will last longer, the vehicles will last longer.
Right.
So
That's the idea.
preventative maintenance.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, something I just spotted here. So if you look at page 18, 19, 20, we have two intruder pages here that should be page 21 and 22.
So that's here. Stuff being used and stuff.
So 21 and page 21 and 22 should actually go behind page 34, so we'll call them page 21 will be page 34A. Page 22 will be 34B. Sorry about that, I just spotted that.
34B, you said?
Yeah. They go on down in the park section. So anyway, pages 18, 19, 20 to 21, 22. Actually, that's probably what he is taking.
The time break, it's all here.
There's I couldn't find it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so now that we've moved those ones. 17 to page 30 are all the vehicles, the fleet maintenance accounts, so I'm not gonna go through them in detail. There a lot of insurance and wages, and then there's repairs, so if there's any questions on them, just let me know, but I'm not gonna dwell on them individually.
Yeah, one question.
Yeah.
I think it's the grader, the 79 Caterpillar, we've got 25,000 for their maintenance.
What page is it?
Oh, I'm sorry, page 27. There's some major line on there.
556.
556.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, as you recall, back in 2017,
Pass me.
when we made the strategic decision to invest in the motor grader, based on some advice that I had received, in agreement with our mechanic. We would like to this year sandblast complete the unit. It's got quite a bit of rust on it. It's relatively unappealing going down the road. So a portion of that 25,000 is money for that, and there's other aspects of the grader that the mechanic needs to work on. He's got some cylinders he wants to replace.
The grader's in good shape, it just seems to be dressed up to look at it. It'll last us quite a few years, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the thought behind putting money into that grader doesn't have all the electronics of the newer equipment.
Which is way better to fix.
And, you know, actually even with our 2017 F550 trucks, we're running into major wiring issues due to salt creep. And, you know, no matter how much we wash it, that salt is just, it's a killer on equipment, and the less electronics you have for it to eat through, the way better off we are. So, you know, we don't really experience those type of issues with our grader, but the grader did go a number of years without any love, so it's time that we put some money into it and get it back into better form.
I did see on one of the pieces, or one of the pages earlier too, for grader training. Now, is that an outside coming in, or just through what you're spending the time an operator sitting with their operator?
That's sending someone to a proper school.
Okay. I think that's better too.
Downstairs.
Okay.
So on page 28, I see we have $25,000 maintenance on the sweeper.
Page
28. I thought we spent 34,000 last year and about 100,000 years before. That's for the new sweeper.
It's not that old yet. Actually, we're just about to pay it off in a couple months. Annually, we have found that it's anywhere between $25,000 and $35,000 to maintain that unit. Yeah. Parts are expensive.
I know from a parts guy perspective that they're brutal, but did you ever look at the option of maybe sourcing that out and not owning that sweeper, contracting that?
Well, we sweep twice a week. That's a lot of sweeping.
Yeah.
We also clean out catch basins with it.
It sucks a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a small hydrovac on the back, which is good basically for catch basins. We haven't got large boulders and things to deal with. It would be far more expensive, and we would not have the level of service that we do now with our in-house sweeping. So I feel like it's worth keeping.
But is that the normal for that type of sweeper in communities?
It is.
Here for maintenance?
You know, we use it a lot. There's been a few things that have happened to it that have just been, you know, one was an accident with the hopper coming down, and the thing was kind of twisted and it hit the control board. That was a big expense one year. You know, the impeller actually got out of balance on it, and that was a massive bill one year. The impeller that creates the suction. It's really a finicky unit. They all are. I called around to some other colleagues in the industry, and you know, they're anywhere from 17 to 30,000 a year on different things. And so you know, it's unfortunately a very expensive piece of equipment. It is. We do use it quite often though, and it helps us keep town clean. It's important.
Talk about a couple pieces of equipment. I got one on 565, the John Deere tractor. I went through the budget part of it too. I did see, Dale might be able to correct me if I'm wrong too, some money that's gonna be set aside for future truck purchases. I think we got a 2008 and a 2010 plow truck right now. That I know I personally have worked on, and they're eventually gonna get tired, so I haven't seen any, I don't know if there's any money set aside for.
I'll speak to that.
After, okay. But on the John Deere side of it, it seems like it's a piece of equipment that only goes out in brush cutting. And it's a very expensive, large piece of equipment that only goes out in brush cuts. Do you feel it's feasible that we have it? Personally, I'm asking from my own standpoint.
I wouldn't have purchased it if I was here at the time. It's not used enough.
Is it an option that we could look at, maybe seeing what the value of that machine is still to this, because I can't imagine it gets a lot of hours put on it.
It doesn't get used often. We use it for dike mowing, which we're required to do,
Yeah,
and some roadside mowing, but it's really got the wrong head on it for roadside mowing. It's more of a brush head.
yeah, it looks awkward for the operator to use it personally, that's how I see it. When I've seen it work on Richmond Hill and stuff like that, doing on the side of it, it seems like it's awkward for the operator to use it, so. Is it, cause it's a fairly new machine, it still has high value right now, is what I'm thinking is maybe there could be a decision that we get something, this is still worth some money right now, that we can sell it and get something that would be more usable to public works.
It's one piece of equipment that's on my radar to at least do a cost benefit analysis on it. I haven't been able to do that yet,
Cause you're busy.
but I wanna look, basically I wanna look at what it would cost to contract out the dike maintenance. It used to be contracted out rather than more being purchased, and, what piece of equipment we would need to do our roadside mowing, or potentially contract that out as well. So,
You're working on it already.
it's on the radar. I don't have an answer for you right now.
No, that's fair, you're,
Certainly one piece of equipment I've flagged is not being used.
to its full potential.
Yes.
Okay, we're in the same area then. We're just-
Councilman Manley is following up.
Yeah, just looking at the number, like the total dollar figure on that sucker is, where are we here, 16,100 a year, right? So,
That's big.
yeah, no, you got, well, that's including wages, benefits, insurance, like, to have that piece of machinery running, budget figure $16,000. I kinda remember when we used to contract brush cutting, it was like $4,500 a year for dike maintenance. I'm not sure if they did any more than that. But the thing about that type of piece of equipment, from my experience, is that they're, and Victor probably can back me up on this, they're very expensive to maintain brush cutters and things, and it's far better to let a contractor deal with that, especially for the small amount that we had. Now, I don't know if the contractor that we used to use still has that equipment, because we, why would he keep it if we weren't using the services, but you never know, it might be well worth looking at that and getting rid of this thing before it becomes unvaluable.
There are several contractors out there that could do the work for us.
I'm sure.
Again, I plan to do that cost benefit analysis on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I've done a preliminary one, and I can tell you that, we'd be better off to contract it out. As you say, it's similar to a sweeper, that it's doing pretty rough work, right? And,
Yeah.
There's a better piece of equipment that money could go towards buying.
and we've already had issues with the studs on it, with the tire setup. I'm not sure the exact thing, it's got shims or something in it. Anyhow, short answer is I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I know on the studs on that thing, that they use a plate to make them fit, which is a cheap way of fixing it, but you're gonna have problems all the time with them, that's quite common among those things. Unit 603, it's a plow net, it's got a $15,000 repair, is that a
So that's
fair amount of work that would be done, or?
a complete rebuild of the plow.
That's a front door, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a front plow for a 5-ton, and we did the one for 223 last year.
Yeah.
It's an $11,000 rebuild, but when the mechanic looked at a new one, they're 15 to 16, but it's not as heavy a gauge of metal.
Done later.
And then we'd have to retrofit our truck with a new mount. So there's quite a bit more work to it. We sent it out to a machine shop, and I tell you, the thing came back, and I was suitably impressed, and I don't get impressed very often. It's brand new.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I just sat there and I just thought the other one was just one.
Yeah,
Okay,
and it never got used this year.
that's good.
So it's still brand new.
Haven't scratched the paint.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, to you, please. What page are we on?
Okay, so if we're done with that, page 30 at the bottom.
If you don't mind, I'd like to speak to something on page 27. Mr. Mayor, for you, Unit 552 at the top of the page. That's a 2006 Caterpillar backhoe. So the floor is completely rusted out on that unit. And it's actually affected the rollover protection system of the cab. So you'll see we've only got $1,000 in there for repairs and maintenance. And that's to put a new battery in it. And the crew will wash it up and I'm gonna put it on the auction. I've identified the unit as surplus, not required. So historically, operations only had 2 backhoes, and when the landfill closed, that's when we ended up with a 3rd backhoe. So we've been through the entire winter now without it, and we've managed. We didn't have a huge snow year, but we do have 2 other backhoes, and I feel like at this time it would be prudent to add an additional backhoe to our fleet.
Councilor Smith?
Just in the backhoe topic, if you're gonna sell that one, is unit 553 user-friendly at this point still, or is it still got the 4-stick controls on the back of it?
Yeah, it's got the 4-stick controls.
Would it be do you think, would it be logical to get that switched over to a more usable, like, you guys probably don't use the whole side of that machine very often, so.
It's been converted once before.
Convert it especially for the operator at that point in time, when it was
It's
purchased.
just back and forth,
That's it?
4-stick to joystick to 4-stick.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's usable.
It's, yeah, it's a good operator on it.
Yeah, I mean,
You don't see an issue with it then?
I don't see an issue.
Okay.
I mean, the guys don't particularly like to use it, but
Yeah.
You're an operator, should be able to operate it.
Fair
exactly,
enough.
we own it, so it's to be
Use
used.
to use this or use a shovel, I get it. Okay, good enough. Thank you.
All right.
At the bottom of page 30. As I mentioned earlier, the safety contract's just gonna get shuffled over to that account there, out of HR. Page 31. Nothing really different from prior years. Again, with the icy snow and that, it's tough to budget for, but you saw what just happened in February. You never know what might happen in November, December. So.
Just a quick question, with our snowplow or ice and snow removal for sidewalks, that contract, is it based off of snow or per, like, it's only based off of snow, right?
It's not sunshine.
Why don't, like, is it, you get this if it snows 3 inches, or if you get 30 inches off of that?
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm actually looking to set us up next year to actually take over sidewalk snow removal. I think we can do it ourselves and do a really good job at it. The way I want to go about doing that is again, not buying pieces of equipment that would be just specific for that, but for example, you know, we've got a 2002 John Deere mower. It's coming to the end of its useful life. I'd like to replace it with one with a cab, because you can get a sweeper attachment and a blade for the front of it, you can plow a sidewalk. You can also get them 4-wheel drive, which our current ones aren't. So then that mower operates in the summer to cut grass, and it operates in the winter for snow removal. And we maximize the use of that unit. So ideally, and we have another 2012 unit, ideally when that one starts getting tired again, we replace it with one with a cab. And this is how we get ourselves prepared to take over the sidewalks. I'm not convinced that a skid steer is the right answer for that. I'm still, you know, weighing all the options, but one of the issues is there's a lot of obstructions on the sidewalks, especially downtown. I mean, they're currently doing it with a quad, so that's how narrow it is. So I'm looking at different things. You know, obviously it takes some time to really assess it all and make sure that we're making the right purchases. But that's the way I'm leaning towards that. So to answer your question, one of the things that I'm not too fond of having a contractor for snow removal is they like a retainer. Because they gotta gear up, right? They wanna gear up, they wanna make sure they have the equipment, so they want a retainer in case it doesn't snow. So they want money up front. So essentially you're paying for something, like if we didn't get snow this year, we would have been out of pocket for no service. I don't like that arrangement. I think if we can do it in-house and we can get the equipment in that we can use for other purposes, then it's a win-win for us, so. We took it on as a pilot project, we thought we'd try out the contractor, and the contractor has done a good job in my estimation. I just think, long-term, it's something that we should look after,
Yeah.
internally.
And personally, I think it's something the town's seen as a good thing too. Like a lot of people complimented that the sidewalks were being done compared to years past where we had not done them before, made them do them themselves. So I do see it as a service that needs to be done. I do like that you're looking to do it in-house.
There's other things you have to weigh in too, and you know, this, we're often working off hours, so we've got
Overtime.
overtime, and manpower. You know, do we have the manpower? And, you know, at times he's got 3 units out there working away. Well, we don't currently have 3 units, and sometimes we don't have 3 bodies to operate that equipment, so these are all things that play into the decision.
Up plowing all night, the sidewalks get done the next day, so you gotta have downtime for employees.
And that's the winter maintenance conundrum, right? Because you've got people working different shifts, and you can only work them so long
Yeah.
legally if they're operating a commercial vehicle, and, you know, realistically from a safety standpoint. And so you start running out of people. At a certain point in time, if you get some consecutive days of snowfalls, you've got people that are on rest, and you can't bring them in, and so these are all things that, you know, I'll be working with the operations manager on honing in on, but I would like to, my past experience in a municipality up north, we did all the snow removal inside. We did hire for hauling and things like that, but we did the sidewalks, and we had a couple pieces of machinery, and we were able to do it really, really well. And we're able to get, you know, when there's a complaint that comes in, we can act immediately. We've got people at the ready that can get out there and they can deal with it, right? But I will say that our local contractor's been doing a bang-up job for us.
Well, I do appreciate your common sense approach. I think you got the support at the table here for that. Back to you, sir.
Okay, page 32. Nothing really different from prior year on page 32. Page 33. Color cut there. We're still required for the landfill monitoring, so there's a number in there that's consistent. The weir repair was brought forward from last year. Page 34.
Councilor Erickson, sir.
For, on page 33, economic development,
Yeah.
150,000. Are we still funding that this year?
Yes. There's a 2017 to 2019 contract.
So they're not fulfilling the contract.
Contracts at the end of this year, this budget.
So I'm just wondering why we're paying for it not doing anything.
I don't think you
I
can say
follow.
you're not doing anything.
Well, there's no economic development going on.
Yes, sir.
Sure there is.
It hasn't stopped.
We don't have an economic development officer.
That doesn't.
That's not
Yeah, they've been using some in-house and some outside service contract work. Yeah, we'll look at that at the end of the year, Councilor Erickson, like we said. There's, right now is a contract in place.
You know, since January, since November, he hasn't been here. He hasn't been here working, so that's $80,000 of his wages that, I don't know why we'd be paying $150,000 to Vantage Oak for, if he has someone working, doing the job, they're not doing it. They haven't hired anybody else to do it, so why would they?
They're having a meeting right now in the other room, talking about things like this.
Yeah, we're still, the district still has to come with $150,000 for what?
If there isn't a person in place, they're not spending those dollars.
We still have to budget for the member.
Yeah, we still have to budget for the number. It doesn't
We don't
necessarily
spend it-
mean
we
we're
don't spend the
spending
money.
$80,000 on whatever.
Yeah, but we're giving them $150,000 this year.
As per the contract.
But they breach the contract because they don't have an economic development officer, do they?
None of the contract says that you must have an economic development officer, it says that these are the services, and this is the fee for service agreement.
It doesn't make sense for them to hire one now when the contract is due in December. How can they attract someone to do that?
Well, then maybe we shouldn't be paying that.
So what they're doing is using in-house and some contractors to fulfill that obligation without going out and hiring a professional from the outside for a 7-month contract. Doesn't make sense.
But it's really not a 7-month contract, it's a whole year contract, because they
Or
haven't had one
8
since,
months.
they haven't had one since November.
We haven't had a person in that position since,
I think it's November or
No,
December.
December, he left in February. Yeah, he left in February.
Could I call it, bring this subject up?
Anyway, I just think we should
Another
look at it, we should look at it and see.
We have looked at it, and they've been instructed to have tight control of that budget between now and the end of the year, and make sure they're delivering what they were promised on the
rural dividend fund.
Yeah, well, that's different, rural dividend
That's
funds.
part of it.
no, it's part of the
And
economic
CHOP is
development
the
fund.
main.
Yeah, for the rural dividend, I know for the rural dividend, sure it is, I understand that.
But for budgeting purposes, Councilor Erickson, there's no change here between now and the end of the year. What you'll probably see is a surplus at the end of the year coming back from that organization.
So starting with parks on page 34, 34A, and 34B, there's no real significant swings in these numbers. I do understand, just wanted to confirm because I do have the chainsaw carving event, I believe there's one this year.
Yep.
So that's in there. Page 35, the only number that stands out there, and Kevin wanted to speak to it, was the rec center contracts of $40,000, and that was for repair work versus capital work.
Yeah, so we've had a building assessment done from Mr. Mayor through you, on the rec center, and, it hasn't been presented to you yet formally, but, there's a significant number of upgrades required for that facility, as you can well imagine, the roof being one. So, I mean, in this contract, there's some remaining windows to deal with. There's, you'll see further on in the capital, we need to replace the dosing controllers for the chemical that balances the pH in the pool. We've got chlorine lines in the facility that are from 1997 that we want to proactively replace before we have a chlorine leak. Not to say that a leak is imminent, but this is the responsible thing to do. And yeah, so there are a number of things identified in that report. This is what we're looking to target this year. There's locker replacement coming up for the change rooms. I won't go through all the reading that we can forward that report off to you. It's a little bit alarming. I mean, the consultant pegged the new roof at $1.6 million. I'm not sure it's worth quite that much, but you'll see that we're continuing to contribute to the DSAC reserve. Another $250,000 going in this year, that'll bring us up to about $750,000. And this is to ready ourselves for some of these big ticket items that are gonna come our way.
Okay, page 36. That's all color. I can't change it. That's just our commitments to our interfaith borrowing and amortization, which I mentioned earlier, is a non-cash item. Page 37, at the top, so the principal portion of our debt.
Yes.
And the bottom portion of page 37 is what we've got budgeted at this point in time for the reserve transfers into. The 345 matches the revenue that I spoke of about at the top of the show there. Fire capital contribution, and this is where Councillor Smith asked about the fleet reserve, and Kevin suggested that we start increasing that reserve, so we're putting in 25, proposed 25 for this year. And then Kevin also alluded to the DSAC reserve, which this will be our third year contributing to that, to brace ourselves for what's coming, to soften the blow when it does happen. So that concludes the general fund. Moving on to the sewer fund. Some of the color there at the top is we've done the billing already, so it's out there. And the other numbers are all consistent with prior years. Expenditure side in the sewer fund. Nothing really different from prior years, except under contracts, we've added $75,000 for the sewer master plan, which Kevin briefly spoke about. So that's in there for this year.
So the 25,000 inspection of 10% of sewer lines annually, is that something you always have done, or just something that's moving forward?
No, that's something that we've done in the past.
That's Jim.
Some years we haven't quite got to the 10%.
Is that done in sort of in concert with the paving management plan like you're talking about?
It will be, yeah, so in the coming weeks, I'll have a few areas where I come in and flush the lines, which is part of our maintenance program anyways. But the second piece of the puzzle is they actually camera the lines so I can look at their condition. So, yeah, we're doing a maintenance and we're doing a sort of an asset management piece all at the same time. And so, yeah, you know, ideally, I'd like to get up to about 25% of the lines every year. But again, it's costly, so I want to balance, you know, the expenditures in that regard. But you know, so far it's been going really well. I would like Dale, if you don't mind, through you, Mr. Mayor, to speak to the sewer master plan. The one piece similar to last year, when we did the water master plan, I applied through UBCM for the asset management planning grant. That's up to $15,000. I was successful last year for the water master plan. I plan on doing the same. It's not in the budget, just because I don't want to speculate that we're going to get it. But if we do get it, that's great. We have $15,000 to offset the cost of the sewer master plan.
Page 3 of the sewer fund. Actually, I just want to zoom back to the first page there. There's 81,000 transferred from the sewer reserve. That's basically to the PCC project that we had the grant for starting in 2017. I've claimed everything I possibly can up to the end of 2018. So we're just waiting for, they won't release those funds until they get the final report. They're very sticky with their, it's quite a project, process that Kevin and I are going to have to go through, mainly Kevin, hopefully.
We all heard that.
It always seems to be that.
And so anyways, there's no more grant money that will be in the budget in 2019, so we have to fund about 120,000 approximately of the balance of that project. So 81 we've targeted from the reserve, because it's our responsibility to cover that, because the grant's been all soaked up. So and then that'll finish that project off. Going into the water fund, and again, you'll see that the sewer fund is balanced. The water fund, again, we've highlighted the ones that the building's already gone out. Everything else is consistent. No significant changes on page 2. the fund for 2019. Well, I guess another point here is there's still 35,000 from the water master plan that, I think 100,000 we had last year, and we spent 65, so we're carrying forward the balance. So that's in there for 2019. And even after all that's done, I used $134,000 to balance the fund by putting that into the water reserve, so that's a good news then. The police fund, again, I talked about the, I think it was $42,000 revenue increase from last year. And I used the surplus to balance the fund at 133,000. That number's probably cut in half from last year, so we're using less surplus to balance it. And that brings the police fund to zero.
If I can, at this point, you recall, we got a reduction in accommodations last year, which is significant, but this does not include any proposed increases to staff. This is at the 13.
So jumping into capital. I have one item in my department on the wish list.
That's it?
That's it. So maybe that'll get snuck in. Anyways, I got a program where I've been replacing the PCs in the office. And so this would be the 4th year. But I'd like to get the last 6 workstations done in 2019 to get them all up to Windows 10. Because they're still on 7 and there's some issues with some of the programs and that. So that's what that's for. In the fire department, we're carrying forward the fire truck from last year. And I just realized something.
Question on the fire truck? It's just back order to try and fill the order, to order one, or you just haven't had the chance to order one yet?
From last year?
Yeah.
2 reasons. We hadn't had a chance to order. It was going to take 16 months to build. And by the time the budget was complete in May, and then June, July come around, it's just not going to happen. And then we didn't have enough money budgeted. The price of the chassis now basically building the same trucks we have, the Freightliner chassis, is now $110,000 for the chassis. The last one we bought was $80,000. The tariffs now and such have now increased a lot of things. And so what we're trying to build, we're trying to create, we needed more money, so we want to be sure we have enough. I do have an RFP out there now that closes at the end of March to see, so we can start to expedite that once the budget gets approved.
It's crazy how much number of trucks and all, even with American Dollar too.
I just found $500,000.
Where's Tom's truck? Wait. Which way?
Hold on, he still wants 16,000 for computers, right?
I'm not going to tell you once I get there. What I just realized is the whole plan with the fire truck, and it was in last year's, is that we were paying for it out of the reserve. And I don't have that in here. So there's going to be $500,000 coming in on the revenue side out of the reserve. So that, in essence, if you were to look at page 6 in the general fund, that $520,000, and this is just for discussions tonight, but yeah, I mean, if you see on page 6 there, I've got the transfers from the future expenditures, I've got transfers from infrastructure. I should have a line transfer from fire department reserve for $500,000. So that basically would knock that that surplus transfer just down to $20,000.
I want to see from the top there.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's a good thing. Because the whole idea, you know, with the fire truck was to pay it out of the reserves. That's the whole intention of the reserves itself. So what we're doing also, like I touched on the fact that we're putting more money into the fire department reserve. Because in the next 5-6 years or whatever, they're gonna need another truck based on underwriters, things and such like that. So just because that we've got this truck going, we shouldn't be complacent and not keep building up our reserve. The same principle for any reserve really, but especially with fire department because they're so sticky with it. How long they can put a truck in service, so I'm glad I spotted that. So jumping back to the capital. So we talked about the fire truck and then there's a couple items under fire equipment. In the fire department there. Public Works, the Cockwell Lake drainage was brought forward from last year and then we added 5 based on some new estimates that we have. The Richmond Hill project for the grant applications back in. And then Kevin can speak, maybe at the end here I'll go through them all and then Kevin can speak to that one. The Othello Road is in there as per the grant application. There's a request for a forklift and an axle trailer public works. And then we have to replace the fuel kiosk in order for our fuel system to work properly. We've gone through all this effort of breaking up the fuel and monitoring it, and if we don't get this done, it's kind of got all in vain. So, and then we'll even get better information going forward. So, second page of capital, the art improvements was a carry forward for the balance of work that was budgeted last year. There are a couple items under capital for the DSAC, which is a chemical feed and the chlorine, which Kevin touched on already. The balance of the PC project, which I mentioned, and then under water, there's the SCADA upgrades and a generator for well 11. So there's not a whole lot of capital in there. A lot of it is carried forward. Which I think is a responsible thing. There's no point putting a lot of capital in there if you're not going to get to it, and then you got to be able to pay for it. So I'll let Kevin kind of wrap up the capital thing if he wants to touch on a little more detail on the paving.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. We've got 1.2 million in the paving plan for this year, which is in line with our plan. However, unfortunately, based on the information I gave you earlier, I'm not going to be able to achieve that this year. So what I'd like to do is drop the 1.2 million down to 600,000. That will give me enough to do Park Street over here between 3rd and 4th, which is in our shade. It only has a storm main under it that I'm going to do a condition assessment on. And then do 3rd from Park to Coquihalla, which again is in our shade. And of course, a portion of that is a developer contribution, over $100,000 worth. And then the 600,000 also gives me some money to do some surveying, some coring, and some infrastructure assessments on other areas that are in the plan that will get us ready to go for next year. So I anticipate that we will be spending quite a bit next year, but that's where I'm at right now, and that's what I'm proposing. I'd hope to do 1.2 million worth of paving, but it's not something that I want to rush through. I certainly don't want to pave any streets without having all the information about the underground utilities, and that's the position I'm in right now.
Thank you. Councilor Medler?
A question about the forklift. So, as long as I've lived in town, I don't think there's been a forklift over there. So, why do you see a need now? I guess that's a good first question.
There's quite a simple answer to that question, actually. We use the machine shops forklift on a regular basis. And it was a very, very good deal for the district. And I tried to purchase the forklift off the owner, but he took it with him. So now we don't have a forklift. And so we have no means of loading or unloading anything in our yard. And so most of it is being delivered to Napa and sitting there on pallets, which is not convenient for us. You know, we had forks that went in the bucket of a backhoe, but there's no rating on those forks. You can't see what you're doing, they're not safe. So for loading and unloading, this is for a gently used forklift, by the way, but it's a piece, we use the machine shop forklift 3 to 4 times a week. And our mechanic, he's got heavy plow blades and things like that he needs to be able to lift certain pieces of equipment and certain parts in the shop, and he has no lifting capability at the moment, so.
So, second part, I see your point, that's good to know that information. I was thinking, maybe we'll work out, because I thought we used to have three backhoes, I thought maybe buying a set of forks for a backhoe, but if one of them's gonna be gone, and the other two, I mean, is there an opportunity to do that instead of buying a forklift?
Well, the issue with that is it's a big machine and you're trying to maneuver in the shop with a backhoe. You can't get to all the places that you need to get with it. You know, there's realistically the best bet, safety-wise as well, is to get a forklift. I mean, I looked at the skid steer, right? You can get forks on a skid steer, but to get anywhere near the lifting capacity of a forklift, you've got to get the biggest skid steer out there, which we don't necessarily need. So, I mean, one of the largest skid steers has got a 4,400 pound tipping load. Well, we're looking at a forklift with 8,000 pound tipping load. So, you can't even come close, and you're paying way more money for that piece of equipment. So, it's something that's been identified. It is a safety issue because we have people hand bombing heavy things off the trucks right now because we don't have the means to.
Just from my own personal experience, I'm looking at doing this myself at our business, but a wet lease program too, on a forklift as well. Maybe just have a peek at it. I'm in the middle of just doing it myself. You do pay a monthly, say $400 or $500. Everything's taken care of, whether in the field, obviously, or if you damage it. It all depends on what size forklift you want and everything like that. Another option as well too. It may not be suitable for that, but maybe something to look at as well. I could see the need for the forklift part of it. I had this question for myself too, but totally makes sense with the machine shop being gone to not, you have a shortfall now, you'd be able to unload stuff now, so.
It's had a noticeable impact.
The other Councilor Smith.
So I know I've used the forklift over in the shop there, because you can turn around a small area of the forklift. With the other one, you have to have 2 guys to be safe to do it. And the skid steer, if you try to load a truck, you can't lower the forks down, so the guy can't get out of the cab, so you need a second guy to do the job that one guy can do with a forklift. You know, it's way easier than that. And then also the forklift too had softy tires instead of rubber tires, which are much better in the pavement for getting around in the shop and stuff. The other thing in here I was looking at is forklift was the trailer. Was that for just moving stuff around town by yourselves?
Yeah, so.
Because there is nobody around town really that much doing stuff.
So if you'll recall, for those councillors that are returning, we bought a tandem axle trailer back in 2017. What we found now is we're getting that paving truck back out on the road, right? We need a trailer for the roller and sort of paving equipment. Well, at the same time, we need to get our mower around town as well. So we're running into days where we're jockeying trailers back and forth and having to go pick people up and you know, for $8,000, you know, I'm also proposing a trailer that's got a more heavy duty ramp this time, so that if you get down the road by a skid steer, the ramp would be able to handle the weight of it. So we're preparing for the future in some regard, but we're also dealing with an efficiency issue that we have at the moment. And the trailers, other than a commercial inspection, really don't cause us any pain or any grief with repairs and maintenance. So it's a fairly inexpensive piece of equipment to have, but it's one that you need when you need it.
So on probably for the next meeting, we'll show you, like I said, we have 1.2 million in the capital budget for paving, so if that number gets right now we're using gas tax to basically fund that, both our current allotment and some from the reserve. So I'll have to look at the numbers with Kevin and come back and just show what might have changed. What we, in our preliminary discussions, is that I would obviously not have to use gas tax reserve. If I don't want to use it if I don't have to, because it's precious money for future paving projects. But also, it may be beneficial to look at increasing the transfer to the infrastructure reserve for a portion of that gap between 1.2 million and what Kevin decides that he's going to use for this year, because ultimately it potentially can be used for future paving projects. But at the same time, because we're not using gas tax money, if we're reducing it 300,000 or whatever down to 600, there'll be a savings on some kind of revenue side that we don't have to pay for the full 1.2. So until we sit down and talk about it together, we'll show that, how that reflects on this for the next meeting.
One quick question. Just on for the truck and the things, he put $25,000. Now, for the reserves part of it, like this backhoe that you're gonna sell, does that just go into the vehicle reserves? Part of it? Okay.
Yeah, all the equipment that's been auctioned,
Goes back into that.
we put into the fleet reserve. So we're building it up, but
Yeah.
if we ever had to buy a big piece of equipment,
Like a plow truck's gonna be, it's gonna be $250,000, $300,000. Yeah.
yeah, so
$25,000, that's only 10 years, that takes 10 years to save up at that point, but I see.
So you'll see on that reserve schedule where we are with that. I mean, it's better than it was when I first got here.
Yeah.
And we're upwards of around 450 right now, I think.
I just don't wanna see us shoot ourselves in the foot, but you guys.
And so you know, Mr. Mayor, that is part of the equipment disposal policy, so we have to put it back in.
Reserve.
If I could just speak to that, Mr. Mayor. Previously, I had brought up the subject of contributing to the Public Works Reserve. It didn't get through the cuts on previous budget sessions. I do feel that the $25,000 is very modest. We could increase that. I think we should increase that. But to start out with, it's something, it's better than nothing, but something for council to think about. I mean, we've got a lot of equipment, we've only got 400 and some odd thousand in the reserve. Like I said, one plow truck and you're down to 100,000, so certainly, we could probably stand it to double that at least. And again, my feeling on, the amount that we're not spending on paving this year, the amount we're reducing it, I'd like to just see that going to the reserve, infrastructure replacement reserve, personally. If we get all of our planning done this year, we could potentially do 1.8 million with the paving next year. It's important to keep building on these reserves.
The other thing for council's knowledge too is I think our gas tax reserves at about 1.3. We get about 320 annually until this agreement ever expires. But where do we go once our gas tax is gone? This is where the infrastructure reserve serves the same purpose. So, we're putting 345 in there. That'll bring it up to about 2 million. And when Kevin and I sit down on this issue for the 1.2 this year, and if we end up putting another 300,000, we're still, all we're doing is getting ahead of the game for more paving down the road. No pun intended.
It may soon be changing the name to cannabis.
For the support.
Yeah, not cannabis tax, cannabis.
Smoke tax.
They're talking about it, so we'll see what happens. Councilor Smith.
Just on the repairs on the workstations and that, it's probably a good idea because System 7, they're actually not supporting it anymore very much. So you're going to, one day it's going to be an absolute crash on you. So my plan for this.
I didn't want to delay. I mean, I did have, at the end of next year, I would have gone the cycle. And I think when I started it, few of us in finance got it the first year, well, we're on Windows 10. Well, I wasn't planning on, in 2021, replacing my machine. I'm happy with it, it's working fine, until they start changing the software. I'm not necessarily, just out of reason, just starting the whole cycle again, but because times have changed from Windows 7 to Windows 10, it's time to get everybody up to where we are now.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin and I were talking also that the Office 2016, most of us are on in this office. They now have 2019, but I'm not gonna go switch everybody to 2019 just because it's the newest thing. Office 7 is basically almost obsolete, so I think, you know, Kevin's running into that issue with some of the public works stuff, so. Yeah, so I think it's important that we just get them all caught up and then nobody's got any issues up there.
No, for sure.
You done tonight, sir?
I am.
I just have one question.
Okay, Councilor.
If we buy a new fire truck, do you have a place to store it, or are you gonna get rid of one of the old ones?
This would be a replacement for one of the old ones, correct?
You're trading one in?
Well, it would probably be a sale. They don't trade in a 1982 fire
Or
truck.
you can get the 82 one?
It would be a 82, 89, the old Ford. It's 86, sorry, 86. Old Ford's an 86. So that's one of the original ones from the Copper Lake Department back in the day. And so it's time. So it would, as per policy, would go to the auction or be sold off.
And then the new one's gonna be the right size to fit in where the rest was.
That's part of the build, yeah. Yeah, it would be designed to fit in the halls we have, you bet. That's the intent. It won't have a ladder in the roof.
Don't go down that road tonight.
Fire- There's been fire departments that have trucks showed up that they bought that didn't fit their hall, which I won't mention any names, but it's embarrassing.
I could too, but I won't even.
So this is, basically where we're sitting right now, is this is with a 0% tax increase from us? Is that where we're sitting right now?
No,
We're still
we're-
with
we're-
the average
we're-
at 2%.
We're generating
3.4%.
3.4% more revenue,
Revenue, with no tax increase from
but
funded.
when you combine the assessment increases with the fact that, and it said 170,000 of that 264 is new construction that wasn't there last year. So if, say that 170 wasn't from new construction, then those scenarios I showed you, people would probably pay, I mean, they had some savings. Their savings would be a lot less because we didn't have that 170 coming from new construction. So what you'll see here is we've generated 3.1% or whatever it was, but the tax rate is going down.
because of more, yeah, I get
Right,
that.
so, I mean, it's a pretty good scenario for a lot of taxpayers in town.
It's a good news story.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're generating more revenue. I mean, costs are always increasing, but we're not nailing them. You know,
The regional district did the same thing with their budget, just based on new growth. No tax increase.
So, yeah, again, a lot of people confuse the fact that, yeah, we're raising tax, like, just, if I were to say I'm raising taxes 3.1%, I'm not, right? I'm showing you right here that I'm actually reducing some taxes here, so, there's a lot of factors in there, depending on what your assessment is, how much it went up, is it over the threshold? If somebody, did some, you know, outrageous renovations or whatever from BC Assessment's point of view, and their assessment went up 25%, well, they're gonna be the ones that get hit the hardest, because they're over that threshold. And you saw in the business example where you only went up 1.2% or something, or 1.7, look at the savings they got there,
Yeah.
you know. So, I'm sure they'll be happy about that.
That's great.
But we're still generating revenue, you know, in this graph that we want. And yet people are saving out there as well, so it's it's kind of win-win.
Mr. Wojciechowski.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, the next workshop scheduled for, I believe, next Tuesday, is that right?
Tuesday the 19th.
All right. And I would invite any of your questions or comments, if you want to email me, and I'll sort of before the meeting, and if there's anything really significant as a result of those, we'll certainly bring those up at the meeting for transparency purposes.
One last comment, I forgot, Don just reminded me. In this draft, we don't have the tablets or laptops that are proposed for, so that'll be in there. We haven't got our quotes in yet, so I just wanted to
I
remind you.
expected them.
Expect that in the next draft. Hopefully we'll have decent numbers for Tuesday.
Small beer.
All right. Anything else for tonight? Motion to close. I'll speak rather, thank you for participating.